Working during winter is never fun, especially when you work until late at night. And my job at the gas station finished at 11:30, but then I had to take the bus that left me at the closest stop to my house. And by the time I arrived to the bus stop, it was already midnight, and then I needed to walk for another 15 minutes before getting home. And at first, I found that routine extremely boring. It was not the routine I was used to. I normally worked in the afternoon, but someone had to cover the night shift during winter, and I was the only option, unfortunately. I mean, I accepted because they paid €4 extra for the hour, but after the first 2 weeks, I was starting to get, just utterly bored. And when I agreed to have this job, I had no Christmas plans, but it seems like as soon as I was busy, everybody wanted to make plans with me. On the third week, I was willing to tell my boss that I wanted to go back to the afternoon shift. Fortunately, he didn't show up, and that gave me some time to think things over a little bit. I started wondering what was best for me. Going out with my friends and love interests for the whole month, but being broke, or making the sacrifice of having no social life but making more money so I could buy a car. And I know most people will choose the second one, but being a 21-year-old guy, all that was in my head was being able to drink, party, and, possibly sleep with Ella. And now I tried to think about the best decision, but nothing came to mind. So, I kind of asked God for a sign. Please, Lord, give me a sign before tomorrow comes. I simply asked. And eventually it was time to close the store, and so I did the same as I always did. I took the bus and listened to music through the whole ride. At 12:05, the bus arrived at my stop, which is not a big one since I live on the outskirts of the city. Technically, closer to the countryside than to the city attractions. When I got out of the bus, I saw there was someone wearing white, just sitting there on the benches. But I tend not to look at things, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I crossed the street and started walking towards my house while still wearing headphones and listening to loud music. And I noticed someone was walking behind me, but I didn't bother looking back since I'm not the only one who gets out of that bus stop. However, after about 4 minutes of walking, I started noticing the person was going the same direction. So I tried to look casually and noticed it was the person wearing white. Taking a better look, I noticed that it was a white dress. So, that put my head at ease, knowing that it was a woman. However, since I was trying to look casually, I didn't manage to see her face to notice whether it was one of my neighbors or someone I even recognized. And so I kept walking, trying to speed up until I finally got home. And as I opened the door, I noticed the woman in the dress went past me, which means it was just all a coincidence and she was just going in the same direction. I entered the house, and when I was about to close the door, I took a good look at her. She happened to also be looking at me. I would have never expected to feel what I felt. She was so gorgeous. I had this feeling in my chest, and I got all clumsy and I even managed to drop my keys. She had beautiful light blonde wavy hair, pale skin that shone brighter than the moonlight, raspberry-colored lips and gray eyes. Her face looked innocent and shy. She looked to be around my age, too. Now, the dress she was wearing was a little old-fashioned, but it looked good on her. And I don't know for how long we stared at each other, maybe a minute or two, but eventually she looked at my feet, and then she smirked. Now I looked down and realized, that the keys had fallen on my shoes. I felt so embarrassed. I immediately picked them up, but by the time I stood up, she was walking away. I stared at her for another minute until she was no longer there. And that night, I just couldn't sleep. Who was this lady? I wondered. I just never seen her before. But there was one thing I knew, that I wanted to see her again. I convinced that maybe this was the sign from God. Now, the next day, I woke up just before 11 a.m. I took a quick shower and then decided to walk around my block, hoping to find the beautiful lady. And I walked and visited all the places around, such as the library and the restaurants and the 3 supermarkets. There was also a sports center, but nothing. She wasn't there. And by the time I noticed what time it was almost time to get ready to go to work. So I had to rush home to go get my uniform and then, of course, grab the bus. And when I got to the bus stop, I didn't see the beautiful girl. But I did not lose my faith and hoped to see her again that night. And of course, work was never so slow as that day. I couldn't stop looking at the clock. But eventually the time passed and it was time to go home. This time, when I was on the bus, I didn't even put on my headphones. I was just there paying attention to everything around. There were 4 other people at the bus, including one man from Cameroon, who was the other person who sometimes just got out at the same bus stop. He got out first, and then I got out. And at first, I did not see the lady, so I kind of felt disappointed. But then I turned back, and there she was. I looked at her and smiled, but she didn't smile back. She just stared at the ground. "Hey, looks like we're going the same way," I told her. That must have scared her or something because she blushed, and I got instantly shy. I didn't want her to think poorly of me, so I just walked away. All the time, she was behind me again. I felt so uneasy. Now, I wanted to speak to her, but she already looked shy enough. I couldn't even tell whether she wanted to speak to me or not. But I didn't want to scare a poor young lady walking alone at midnight, so I decided not to say anything. And eventually I got to my house and did the same as the other day. I opened the door, I got in, and I looked at her. Once again, she had also stopped and looked at me. And after a minute of staring at each other, she waved her hand at me, gave me a gentle smile, and she left. And that night, I felt as the most stupidest person on earth. She clearly was gentle and wanted me to speak to her, and I needed to stop being so shy and make a move tomorrow night. So the next day I had a plan. I would even leave my job a bit early so I wouldn't miss her. I closed the shop earlier, without permission of my boss, but hey, it was emergency, you know? I got to the bus stop at 11:40, so 20 minutes earlier, but she was not there. I calmly waited until 20 minutes had passed, but nothing. I even decided to wait until 20 past 12, but she never showed up. And it was starting to get really cold, so I decided to just head home. However, I felt like crap. I couldn't help but thinking I had lost all my chances with her. The following day was not the same. I felt depressed the whole day. Didn't have any energy to visit places to try to find her. And I went to work just because I still had the hope of maybe seeing her later on. However, I was more than sure that that wouldn't be the case. Unexpectedly, however, that night after I got off the bus, she was there, looking as sparkly and beautiful as ever. Hi, I didn't think I would see you again," I said. "I couldn't be here last night. Sorry," she answered. Now I had to reach down deep inside to grab some courage, but I asked her if she wanted to walk with me. She didn't say yes, but she looked at me with her bright eyes and nodded her head. That night was the happiest moment of my life, and talking to her felt like a magical experience. She was so sweet and adorable and overall different to every other girl that I knew. And when we finally got to my house, I didn't want to say goodbye, so I asked her if I could walk her to her place. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said, "but see you tomorrow at the same time, okay?" she said before leaving. And all of a sudden, everything changed, and going to work was the most exciting thing ever. When I got off the bus the next day, she was already there, as she had promised. There was one thing that was really interesting, though. She was always wearing the same thing. "That's a beautiful dress," I said. "Thank you, I'm glad you like it. It's the only thing I'm allowed to wear these days," she replied. So I asked her, "So is it like a uniform?" "Well, yeah, kind of." That night I asked her out, and at first she was hesitant and said she didn't tend to leave the area for so long, but then she agreed to go out with me. I took her somewhere near, a burger place where myself and my friends sometimes go. When we got to the burger place, she was even more nervous. I asked her what she wanted to eat, but she said she wasn't hungry. I asked her if it was okay for me to eat, and she said she had no problem with it. So I went to the counter to order when someone touched my shoulder. And I turned back, and I saw Ella, the girl I guess I used to date. Ella looked very upset as soon as she saw me. She asked me why I haven't replied to her texts. I said, well, I was busy. And she started to act dramatic, so I simply told her the truth, that I had met a girl I really liked. But when I was about to show her who I was talking about, she wasn't there. I left Ella talking to herself. I also didn't grab the burger. I just left to look for the girl. I looked for her everywhere, but she wasn't there. Of course, I was pretty upset, but I was hoping to find her the following day, on New Year's Eve. Now, on New Year's Eve, I did nothing but think about the beautiful girl and what had happened to her. I kept getting phone calls and messages from family, friends, and Ella, but I ignored all of them. There was only one thing on my mind, and on the bus ride back home, I kept hoping and praying to see her. And when the bus finally stopped, I almost tripped on the man from Cameroon because, well, I wanted to see her so badly. Luckily, my prayers had been heard. There she was, looking like a miracle. Every single day, more beautiful. Now this time, I didn't want to waste any time. I wanted to know who she was, and well, if she liked me. So first, I asked her name, and she told it was Marjorie Lorenz. And I was about to ask her for more information when she interrupted me. "I'm sorry for leaving last night. I didn't want to, but I told you I don't often leave the area," she nervously said. It's okay. Don't worry about it," I told her while grabbing her hand. "Richard, I don't think I'll see you again after tonight," she said while she had tears running down her face. I was surprised. I don't think I ever told her my name, but I must have since she knew it. However, I don't remember her telling me her name before. "Why can't we see each other? Are you moving?" I asked. "No," she said. "Well, then why?" "Well, because you'll never be happy with me. You'll never have a normal life with me." She continued crying. And so I asked, "Don't you like me?" And she replied that she does. I didn't need to know anything else. I had the impulse to kiss her. It was beautiful and amazing, but when it finished, she was no longer there. She had vanished once again, but this time right in front of my eyes. And at that moment, I freaked out. I screamed her name and looked for her, refusing to believe what my mind was telling me was the truth. And on the 1st of January, I didn't have to go to work, but I still walked to the bus stop at midnight hoping to see Marjorie, but she wasn't there. Although, when the bus stopped at 12:10, the man from Cameroon got out of the bus and said hi to me and asked me if I was okay. I asked him if he had seen Marjorie, and he asked me who she was. I explained to him she was the beautiful girl that had been waiting for me all these days. The girl who always sat on the bench when we arrived. He looked very confused. "Well, I haven't seen anybody," he said. "In fact, the reason why I asked you if you were okay is because yesterday, when we got out of the bus, I saw you talking to yourself," he explained. I felt so overwhelmed. I couldn't even speak. I told him I needed to go home, and I immediately left. When I got home, I did what I should have done the day before. Search online for Marjorie Lorenz. There is, in fact, a girl with that name who happens to live in my town. She had died in 1960. What a coincidence, I thought at first. But when I saw the pictures, I learned it was the same girl. Now I understand why Marjorie left. I know that I should be afraid and that I should listen to her. But the truth is that I think I'm in love. Well, I think I'm in love with the dead.